our first competition is this.
Okay, I got a question for you. So let's just say you weren't head to toe, but you had had a week stuff about that thing on any part of, like, anywhere on fire. Where would it be? So if someone stabbed you.
Why don't you grab another of the pink packets?
Where would it be?
And then when you get home, like, tear, you know what I mean? Like, combine this.
Yeah.
I have some extra back there. So like,
Where would it be?
Oh, this seat is so warm.
It's very, very hard to choose. Because
Probably, and I probably broke my food here. I have like 20.
Let me know, like, more than like, yeah, you shot it.
I have a I fell asleep all last class and now I'm first flight.
Hard. Honestly, guys, I put it right here. If I put it right here, I can always see. What the fuck? Understand it? Like, there's someone's coming, someone jumped in and you're trying to, like, move.
Why?
It's neat, like, someone comes like this, go right to you, it's on your forehead. You have time to react and hit.
Dude, look at the dog.
Okay, now I see it.
Yeah.
And I can
Like, but it's
A tiny little book.
But like,
Because the
you're
table
fighting, it's like, first ball.
Nicholson's out, Carson Wentz is out.
Why just put Carson Wentz?
Not a dumb pick. Yes, I know. There are definitely better than There are definitely better than I'm gonna find out. Who's better? Not Ben Roethlisberger.
I mean, I'm putting my dog down.
Carson Wentz or Big Ben? Yes, Carson Wentz or Big Ben. Which one would you rather have? 100%. You are crazy. Dude, you're asking. That's an added question. No, he's not. This is basically rookie season. Wait, whose it is rookie season? This is his third season.
You were invincible.
Yes.
That's a trick. And you were on your body, and if someone here's making it there, you die. Where would you have it? This big.
That's a tricky question.
Okay, so you were invincible head to toe, okay? But you had a body about that big.
You basically have an Achilles heel.
Yeah. You had wherever, if someone hit you there, you were wounded and like can be seriously hurt. But anywhere else, you were not. Like
You're
you
invincible.
get stabbed here and you would just.
You guys already done with your memory?
Okay.
Talking about getting stabbed. Oh my god.
Quincy Vines. Say generic, but yeah, I gotta ask for because I feel like I left you here.
Yeah, I was. I'll make sure it's here. I was here. Yeah.
I gotta ask her if she knew where my mind
Oh my god.
because I have no clue where it went. That's not a good friend.
It's okay to have
Alright, so first of all, this is our first week doing this type of bell ringer. So Mondays are going to be mucked up Mondays, remember? Tuesdays are lit term Tuesdays. Wednesdays we're doing another mug shot to help your grammar and improve your grammar. Thursdays are test prep Thursdays. So what that means is every Thursday I'm going to give you a sample SAT question. You're going to get used to the directions, right? Because the directions aren't necessarily going to change. So this says, following sentence contains either a single error or no error at all. Okay? Your job is to not have cell phones on your desk. That's job number one. Job number one. Why am I seeing them still? You're also not supposed to have earbuds in or listening to music, even though they're out of your ear. I don't want them anywhere near your ear. Thank you. All right. You do not need to correct this. The point and what you are going to do is just put A, B, C, D, or E. E is the answer, there is no error. And folks, just like something to know, we're going to be doing this the whole semester. I think there are only 1 or 2 slides that have no errors, because having a question on your SAT that doesn't have an error is very strange. So if you notice yourself saying like, oh, this is no error, that is no error, this is no error, yay, they're being really easy on me, you're probably wrong. Okay? Because they're not going to give you a lot of these questions that have no errors. The other suggestion, read it aloud. In your head, read it aloud. I know that seems strange, but when you read something aloud, even your papers that you write for class, when you read it aloud, you're going to hear mistakes. So silently read it aloud, because if you start reading during the SAT, you're going to get kicked out. It's true. So, all right. Just this one today. It's only one question. So, I need a volunteer to read. Thank you. Don't worry, we can't pronounce them. Just make it funny.
Cola nuts are caffeine-rich nuts of cola, Ivanino, and cola, Tita, evergreen forestries that are native to tropical West Africa, and that are a member of the same family as.
Okay, so here's the deal. Wait. He stumbled where the mistake was. Folks, the reason he was having trouble was because it didn't sound right. He mentally was trying to correct it in his head, and he stumbled. So, let's read it. Cola nuts are the caffeine-rich nuts of cola amanada and cola natita, evergreen forest trees that are native to tropical West Africa that are a member of the same botanical family as cocos. Where is the error? B. What should it be?
Members.
Members, because you have a noun-noun agreement issue. The subjects, or the noun here, they're saying the nuts are from trees that are a member. Trees is plural, so it should be a member, it should be members. That's your correction. I'm going to tell you, noun-noun agreement, they always put on there. Noun-verb agreement. So a noun-verb agreement issue would be like, trees is a member, or is members. See how that doesn't agree? Singular verb, plural verb, get it? Okay. All right. Well, today is an exciting time. Because Ms. Kramer is going to be teaching you today. For the first time ever. Yay!
Okay.
That was the weirdest sentence I've ever read.
Okay. Go ahead. That's my...
How would you pronounce Austin, how do you pronounce the first
So the first thing we're going to do is hand back. Do you guys remember 2 days ago you had your figurative language assignment where you did all of those songs? So we're going to hand back your grades. But for a lot of people, you had trouble explaining the author's purpose in relation to the figurative language. And so we're going to do some more practice. You're going to get a grade which you can get 100% on, and that'll bring up your grade if you had trouble with it on the first one. So, Mrs. Murray will be handing these out. And in the meantime, I'm also going to hand out your examples. So, we're going to listen to a song, and you're going to identify the main idea of the song, and then how that relates to the figurative language that I underlined for you. So, I'm going to hand those out.
Where'd you get? I got that from Where's Sing?
Charlie heard this.
Does anyone like the gorillas?
Who is
So take a look at your feedback too, guys.
I really shouldn't
I didn't have first block this morning. I didn't have first block this morning. I came in at 8:45. I slept in until like 7:40.
Dude, I
And then I
was
woke
asleep
up
all
and
the
I'm like, hey, it's 7:40. I'm gonna take a shower.
You know what?
Alright. I took a shower, got something to eat.
I have a
I'm going to McDonald's.
from like a volleyball game, I listen to it.
Alright, so the first thing I want you to do, I have given you the lyrics to the whole song here. So I want you to read through it real quick and get the main idea. That's one of the questions on the side. The main thing that the author is trying to tell you. That's the author's purpose, right? And then you have to identify this part that I have underlined. I'm on my journey home with no fuel alone. I think I'll coast a while. We're going to take that as not that he's literally in a car that doesn't have any fuel, but that is some sort of figurative language. So you can identify that, that's the first question. And then make sure that when you're doing your explanation about what this means, that you're connecting the figurative language from the top to the purpose, the second question, right? So you will have the time it takes to listen to this song to complete this assignment, all right? you guys are getting an additional 3 minutes. We're gonna listen through this song. So make sure that you get all of the answers to this and let me know if you have any questions, right? Because this is clarifying what you already did.
It's just that you're very
No, the problem is, Brayden owes me $50. So.
He just doesn't feel like anything. It's just going through okay. How do you answer
I know.
So the main idea is basically like what he's trying to say, this is asking why he used the type of words which shows conclusion.
Alright, so real quick, we're gonna go over the third question, so I need everyone's attention, which means your eyes are up here and your mouths are not speaking, splendid. So the third question is the most important one. The first two are gonna help you with that third one. So, When it's asking about the author's purpose and why there was the use of figurative language, you want to have three things. The first thing you want to have is a literal interpretation of what the words mean. So when it's talking about a car without fuel, the literal interpretation is he is inside a vehicle that does not have any gas in the tank, right? What about the metaphorical? Because we know it's a metaphor, it's a comparison. What about the metaphorical meaning? Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't have any motivation. You could talk about anything that is like being empty of something in your life. You could also say that he's like empty of happiness because he lost his dream, right? So then the third part is when you're talking about the whole idea of the poem in connection to that metaphor. So if he doesn't have any motivation or he's not happy about something, how does that relate to the main idea that was the answer to the second question? That's the third thing that you need, is that connection to the author's purpose. I heard mumbling in this direction. Is there an answer? Do you want to share your answer, Kate? No? All right. Does anyone else want to share an answer? I'm confident that you guys, I know that you're like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm bad at poetry, but I'm confident that you guys have the right answer. How is his being empty of happiness or motivation related to the main idea of the song? No, go for it.
Like, he feels empty because he basically sounds like he just got heartbroken, or he says he's incapable of healing, like something may happen to him, doesn't feel like he's worth anything anymore, so he just feels like he's going through life like lifeless.
Yeah, that is a really good, I like that you cited a line there. Citing textual evidence is always going to help you out in English class. And so yeah, something bad happened to him, and so he feels like a car that's empty of fuel. And since people know what a car empty of fuel is like, that's a good way to add emotion to it. Does that make more sense? Does anyone have any questions about that third question now? Now you can all get 100% on this, so you guys can pass it in. So you guys can pass it this way, the back row can pass all the way around to Layton, and then these two rows can pass over in this direction. If you run over them. All right. While you're passing those in, can everybody get out their poetry unit packets and turn to the study questions that you either finished in class or at home last night?
Page 9. Page 9.
So Mrs. Murren is going to come around and make sure that you have this completed as we're going over these, okay? So, we're not going to go over all of them because Mrs. Murren covered a lot of these while she was explaining the poem, right? So, can anyone who has questions raise their hand about something they weren't sure about? Stephanie, yeah. Okay, so Stephanie is asking about number 4, so can everybody look at number 4? Does anyone feel like they have a really good answer for why the wall flickers and is separated from the mirror? I'm asking if anyone has an answer. So question number 4, does anybody have an answer for question 4? Yeah, Jane.
Page 9.
Yeah, that's really good. So the lights go on and off, and also the sun passes by, so light could be one thing that's making the mirror flicker. What's something else, if you're picturing the mirror looking at the wall, what's something else that would prevent the mirror from seeing the wall? because the mirror can't move, right? So what else would happen? Yeah, if someone's blocking it, because we know that the woman goes to the mirror every single day, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so if someone is in front of it, the wall is flickering, right? Can you all picture that? So for number 4, the wall flickers both because of light, because time is passing, and because things are walking in front of it, namely this woman. No, do you have another one?
Yeah, I still don't get the whole entire thing about like the fish coming up and the ripples and shows that she's like coming older and stuff, and like how like it's a terrible fish. I don't really understand that. How is it showing how she's coming old?
So there are 2 parts to that one, and you're looking at question 8,
Yeah.
right? So make sure everybody's on the same page. We're looking at question 8 at the bottom, and specifically the part about the terrible fish. So the one thing is the fish itself. Have you guys ever seen like what a fish face looks like? It's not like Little Mermaid Disney cartoon. It's not all cute. It's like, it's weird looking. Fish are weird because their eyes are on either side of their head. And so in some ways she's saying like, if you look like a fish, that's probably not a compliment. So she's saying that if she is seeing a terrible fish rising up to her, that she doesn't like the way that she looks. She thinks she looks ugly. But also, when a fish comes out of the water, what happens to the surface of the water? Ripples, exactly. And what do wrinkles on your face look like? Ripples. Because they're like lines that are distorting the way that your face looks. Does that make more sense? All right. Does anyone else have any other questions about this?
And just remember that that terrible fish, that's representative of the aging process, right? And sometimes I'll tell, like from personal experience, Miss Kramer can't speak to this yet because her hair is not gray. But I remember finding my first gray hair and be like, oh my god! It was a shocking moment. So when you age and like, listen, I don't look at my face every day and like pick apart, oh my gosh, I'm getting a wrinkle here because I just don't. Most people don't, right? So you go through life year after year after year, you don't really notice the slight changes because you're looking at yourself every day. But then one day you might look at yourself and be like, oh my word, what happened? When did that get there? Even though it's been like there for a long, you know what I'm saying? So that realization that she's getting older, that startles her. It scares her because she hadn't thought about it before. This moment when she's looking at a reflection and seeing for the first time that she's not as youthful as she once was. And that's scary for some people. Some people are cool with it. Some people go get Botox. It's all how you live, folks.
So that's related to Jaden's point about how all this time is passing. Even though we read the poem very quickly, a lot of time is being covered. Yes, Stephanie?
I understood everything, like the fish and stuff, but what I didn't understand was why was the young girl, why has the young girl drowned? I didn't get that part.
Yeah. Does anyone have a good answer for that one? Yeah, sorry, the first part of 8, why has the young girl drowned?
Because she changed herself so much because she looked in the river. Like, she looked at it too much that she became obsessed with changing herself.
Yeah, so if this young girl is looking in the mirror over all of this time, at some point she's not a young girl anymore, right? And so the young girl, it's like she's drowned in the river. She's not there anymore. Instead, there's a terrible fish, right? Does that make more sense? Does anyone else have any clarifying questions? Okay, so we're going to take the next 3 minutes before lunch, yes, all 3 minutes before lunch. Turn to the next page in your packet, page number 10. What you're going to do is you're going to read through the poem again, because like listening to a song on the radio, the more that you are reading it, the more that you're listening to it, the more you understand about it. So you're going to read through the poem again, and you're going to find examples of personification, simile, and 2 metaphors. Now for personification, we've already talked how the whole poem is personification, right? So try to find another example of personification. So you have 3 minutes. Try to fill out as much of this as you can before lunch.
Maybe that first column.
Yeah. focus on the examples, and then you can try to figure out the literal and figurative meaning after lunch. Okay, you can go to lunch.
Well, I think it's around town here, so I thought maybe because are you supposed to probably head down to a lunchroom?
We usually stay here.
Oh.
I keep her isolated from the negativity of the lunchroom.
Then I'll just stay here with
I don't
you
mind,
folks.
yeah.
That's
Either
great.
way, if you.
Here we go.
Ready, go. Do what? I'm not ready.
Get your hand off the chair.
I don't know. I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be mad.
I got this.
No, move it over so that you don't have room.
Oh, hey, why?
Yo, he's already
Relax. Right there. Ready, set, go.
No, you cheaters.
Yeah.
Sit on the chair. Both of you.
This is illegal. This is illegal.
He literally
Now we're at a weird angle.
No, they texted.
Your legs literally.
And I read it.
Well, can everybody sit in their seats again? Alright, so we're still working on page 10. So if you have all of your examples, then you're good to go on to the literal and figurative meanings. And if you still need to find some examples, you've got time to work on those too. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes to work on this. Not a lot of time. So make sure that everybody's working. Let me know if you have any questions or you're having trouble finding things.
And do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I also want to clarify for the personification. We were just informed that the example we were using for personification is actually a metaphor. So instead, find a line that's a really good example of the personification we talked about yesterday, and then explain the meaning of that. Does that make sense? So, you've got 6 minutes starting now. take the next minute or so to finish up. Alright, so now we're going to get into groups and talk about these. Make sure that you're paying attention to what your group members say, because I'm going to call randomly on people to have these responses. So your groups are going to more or less be your row, but you can stand up and stand and talk in your groups so you're all close and not shouting across to each other. So we're going to have 4 groups because there are the 4 different figures of language, right? So I'm going to split up this row. So Alfredo, can you be in the back row? And the other 3 of you, can you go be in this 3-person group? Does that make sense? So this row is all with themselves. You 3 and this column. Everybody in the back is together with Alfredo, and then this whole row is together. So group up, take another 6 minutes, and make sure that you guys are talking about personification. The back group is talking about simile, and the front and side are talking about metaphors. Split up, be in your groups.
How to spin it. See? You were thinking it though. You. We're gonna talk about this last time. I'm gonna now I'm like a late and in my shoes around a young girl.
Oh, like a terrible.
But is it now I am a late similes?
That one. I was gonna use that, but I don't. Like her
You trying to charge your phone every too?
Yeah, man.
No. So the other group is talking about line 5. So you guys have to give another metaphor. So which line do you guys have? 10. Yep. Sounds good.
That's a metaphor. What I felt now. Yeah, but not like an as. This is now I am a like not like it's a metaphor. That's what it said now I'm like.
I didn't write down mine, I wrote down the example.
It's the same thing.
I said line where it's like, I have looked at it so much.
Line 18, rise to that's pretty much it. I figured it
Yeah, I
made
looked at it so long, I think it's a part of my heart.
I just
That's
like
the part
that,
I can't
like,
go back far enough.
it like has the, it's like describing like the girl's age and like comparing her like old self, comparing herself to the fish that's right off.
Metaphors, like when it says, I've looked at it so long, I think it's a part of my heart. Is that considered metaphor? I'm proud.
The mirror really makes it it's hard. So I think that one is not your best example. I think that if you were trying to I could. Is there a here?
Like
Like the line 5. So you guys have this literal and
Well, are you near her and it?
but I keep calling it. Yeah, that works too.
This is something in the house of mine.
Yeah, so I would say on it, but this is actually this is so all the other trees. I think that that's what you're
I can't take you seriously.
No.
I honestly prefer people
I
say.
know was it a guy or a girl?
It was a guy. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, that made right there. Okay.
I said about the literal I said line,
Are you guys all in agreement? You all know what you're gonna say? You're prepared by columns?
I'm about to get my birthday. No, my birthday is July. Look.
So then,
Why don't you take a picture?
But when it.
Hey, Austin, I gave you the left hand lane, if you could find a piece in there.
Oh, Alina, just took the last spot.
Oh, there's one over here, so that's fine.
I was just kidding.
what you gonna do?
Just say what I feel like. Compared to the girl, the woman.
Really good?
Okay. She go with me.
Get whatever they want.
Hold down on the phone.
The way, like, the rhythm.
So, like, people they didn't do anything. I was reading something today, and it was never like, made a great question. I was really, I was looking at it, and it's,
Huh?
and it's like, you didn't pick one. Did they take a draw? Like she said, with, like, if you got touched, and
Oh, yeah,
they died severely.
I got 5 days.
What would it be?
Yeah.
Rock hard at it.
Your foot. That's a great year.
Where'd you get that from?
Because as soon as you're trying to punch you, right?
No, touching me a rock hard at it. You'd be surprised. Divided.
Alright, so should everybody head back to their seats? You've got plenty of time to talk to the group members.
I did not anymore, I should check. And double check.
Alright, so as the other groups, can I have everybody's attention, please? Thank you. As the other groups are sharing, make sure that you're writing down what they're saying. If you have a different example than them, you can still write down their answers, and if you don't have enough space in the little box, you can put like an asterisk, which looks like a little star, or like a number 1, and then write it somewhere around your page, so that you're writing down and engaged with what your peers are saying, right? So we're going to start with the personification group. That was this group right over here. So, Reno, can you tell me what line you are using for your personification example? Line 2. What part of line 2? Can you read it for us?
Whatever I see, I swallow.
Yes. Excellent. And Ariana, can you tell us what the literal meaning of that is? Yes. The literal meaning is always going to use words from the actual line itself. So that one's pretty easy, right? And then the figurative meaning, this is the part that we're connecting to the main ideas of the poem, right? So, Justin, can you tell me, Jordan, can you tell me the figurative meaning?
Oh.
You're talking to your group members. Okay, so, Giovanna, can you tell us the figurative meaning?
So the mirror actually reflects what it sees. It doesn't like it.
Yeah, so it's not literally swallowing what it is because it's reflecting it. And how is that personification of the mirror related to what Sylvia Plath is trying to say with the whole poem? I don't want to put you on the spot. So, Hadley or Michaela, between the two of you.
Well, like it kind of like you see yourself as something you want to be, but the mirror like shows you what you truly are, like how reality like actually sees you.
Yeah. So it's talking about how it's like taking in everything that you want to be, but it's only showing you the surface. So does everyone have all of those written down? Okay, so we're going to move on to the simile, which is the group in the back plus Alfredo. So, Faith, can you tell me what example you're using?
Like a terrible fish.
Like a terrible fish in line 18. Good. And the literal meaning, Aaliyah?
Basically, saying that like where a woman's aging, there's that she looks like a perfect fish.
Yeah, she literally looks like a fish. That a fish is coming out of a literal lake is the literal meaning. And the figurative meaning is sort of attached to what you were saying there. So, Charles, can you tell me the figurative meaning?
She gets older like every day.
Yes, she's getting older. Exactly. Alright, so does everybody have those? Alright, so our first metaphor group is up in the front. So, Stephanie, do you want to tell me the line that you used?
The line I used was line 16.
Okay.
The people like had different lines.
Okay. So, Stephanie used line 16. What part of line 16?
Ready? All of it. So, I guess it is her face that replaces the darkness.
What's being compared in that?
I guess the light and the darkness.
So I agree that the light and the darkness are in sort of contrast there, but what's a line that there's more of a direct comparison of two related things? Macy, can you give me another line? You want to give me another
I
line?
had 5.
5, that's a great one. So what part of line 5?
I used all of it. The eye of the little god.
Yeah, so let's put, for our example as a class, line 5, the eye of a little god. And there was a study question about this one, right? So, Noah, can you give me the literal meaning of the mirror being the eye of a little god?
Like, whatever you see in the mirror, you're either gonna like worship it or you're gonna hate it, and it's really no between.
That's a really good figurative meaning, right? So the idea of worshiping, the answer that we had to question number 3, is what you want to put under the figurative meaning. But literally, what's being said, Austin? Yeah, the mirror is actually the literal eye of a god, right? So remember that when you have the literal meaning, you're probably going to have words from the actual poem in that, and then the figurative meaning is what you're figuring out, like about worshiping, right? And then our group over here, plus some people in the middle row here, what metaphor did you guys use? Lake.
Now I am a lake.
Now I have a lake in line 10. And then the literal meaning of the mirror and the lake. Shia, can you tell me what the literal meaning is? Yeah, so that the mirror on the bathroom wall transforms into a lake is the literal meaning. And Brooklyn, can you tell me the figurative meaning of the mirror being a lake?
We put that like the mirror and the figures like reflecting, so
Yeah, so that's a really good description of how the metaphor is working. It works because both the mirror and the lake can reflect. And remember what Noah and I were talking about with the idea of ripples? What is that suggesting about the woman's appearance, Jaden?
she's looking old.
Yeah, she's looking older, she's looking wrinkly, and so at the point that the mirror becomes the lake, then we have room for that last idea of the fish coming up from the lake, and that's where we can start doing some more analysis. So, does everyone have all of those? Raise your hand if you missed any part of them. Excellent. So now we're going to talk about, we're going to like take a step back from the poem, and we're going to look at it as a whole. And the way that I like to think about the whole of a poem is with this acronym SET. So, first thing, the speaker of the poem. Who is the speaker of the poem? We've talked about this a lot because it's a really important part of understanding it. The mirror, exactly. How would the poem be different if it wasn't the mirror speaking, but the woman who's looking in the mirror? Yeah,
Because she would be telling you from what her own personal experience of what she sees versus what the reader sees.
yes, exactly. So every time you guys look in a mirror, you have a very clear idea of what you're thinking. You have opinions, right? Can the mirror have opinions?
No.
Yeah, the mirror can't have opinions, and if it does, can it do anything about that?
No.
And why? There's a line in the text that I think is a really good way to describe this. What part of the text tells us that the mirror can't tell any lies? Yeah.
Isn't it, I'm not cruel and truthful?
Yes, exactly. So if the woman were telling the poem, then that would change the emotion. What do you think the emotion of the poem is as it is right here with the mirror being spoken? What's a good emotion word for this?
What? She, me and her said supported.
Disappointed? Yeah, I buy that. And then how about the woman? How's the woman feeling in this poem? Okay, I have another hand. You're good. How does the woman feel in this poem with the tears and agitation of hands? No?
Feels like she feels like she should change and feels like she's disappointed in what she looks like.
Yeah, so both the mirror and the woman are disappointed, right? So that's a good example of the emotion of the poem. And so disappointed, that's not like a positive, happy thing. But do you think that the woman thinks that she can change? That's like a real analysis question. That's not like, yes, I'm sure the woman thinks she can change. Do you think the woman has any hope in this poem?
No.
No?
Yeah.
Why do you say no?
Because she just, the whole entire time, she just keeps dwelling on the fact that she's not what she wants to be, so she'll dwell on it until she, well, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but until she dies. She'll dwell on the fact that she does not want, that she doesn't look like she wants to look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, she's unsatisfied with herself, and she sees in the mirror that there could be more improvement in herself.
Yeah, that there's still more to be seen. So then going back up to the speaker, when it talks about does she have time to change? How old do you think the woman is?
23.
We're gonna go around the room, and I want you to tell me what age you think the woman is. So what did you already said something?
23. 48.
39.
36.
At the end of the poem or the beginning?
Let's do the
Yes.
beginning of the poem. Do you want me to come back to you? 19 is the beginning of the poem.
And 23.
I'm sorry, I was Brooklyn and then Alfredo.
okay.
How old do you think the woman is? Say at the beginning of the poem, how old do you think she is?
Well, like at the very beginning, she's probably say,
Like really young, 15.
Yeah.
20? 23. 16 or 16?
No, 16.
16. Okay, so we got some young people. Yeah, yeah, 16 or 17. Okay. 26.
23.
Like 20, you said?
27.
27?
12.
12. That's the youngest. Cindy, how old do you think that the speaker is in the beginning? Like 30s?
Yeah, like 33.
Yeah, 33. Does the poem say how old she is? No, that's why we have all these different answers, right? But we have a pretty broad range. We've got from 12 to I think someone said 48, 49, yeah. So we've got a whole range. Do you think that the poem would be different if it told you outright? How would the poem be different if it starts with, I'm silver and exact, and I'm looking at a 13-year-old?
You can think about every 13-year-old problem that there is.
Yeah, that's a good example. Anybody else? How would it be different if we know that it's a really young girl? Jaden, yeah.
We're not taking her seriously because she's so young.
Yeah, maybe it's not like, oh, she'll grow out of it. And then on the other side, how would it be different if the poem said, I'm Silver and Exact, I'm looking at a 60-year-old woman?
Feel bad.
Maybe you feel bad. Anybody else? How else would the poem be different? What do you think the poem might choose to emphasize if it were specifically about an old woman? Yeah, like the experiences that she had before that. And so, this is a preview to something you're going to do. Sometimes authors don't want to include all of the information and just say something outright, because now we can have all of these ideas because we don't know how old she is, right? So then let's move on to the last thing to get the gist of it. What is the theme? And you'll notice that there's a place for you to write the theme on page 10. I would recommend that you do that. So take 2 minutes just by yourself to have a theme statement. And who can tell me, what do you need from a theme statement? You need a couple of different things we talked about. Evidence, yeah. What kinds of pronouns should you not use? Yep, first person and second person. Good. So make sure that it is a statement using third person or just speaking objectively. And it also has to relate not just to the poem, but to the whole world. Yes. So take 2 minutes to write the theme and include that textual evidence that Steph was talking about. Remember that a theme is a full sentence, right? You got a theme? You're good. And then make sure you have textual evidence for it, right? The second question. What do you learn? Right, because it means a lesson. And then, so that's like relates to everybody. Make sure you don't have to use a second person. So find a way to phrase that that doesn't happen. And that's a full sentence, right? That sounds good. That's a really good thing. All right, so who has a theme that they are very proud of and they want to share with us? Hadley, you are proudest.
Looks of a person will never be perfect to society.
Yeah, so who else, raise your hand if you also had something about like beauty standards in general. So for those of you who didn't raise your hand, like Brooklyn, what was your theme?
Don't spend life taking something short.
Yeah, so like the idea of life being short, some really good textual evidence is the part about the young woman and the old woman at the end, right? Adam, what do you have?
I said cherish things because they don't last forever.
Yeah, so like that things are moving very quickly. That's really similar to Brooklyn's theme. Good. And so the fact that you guys have like repeated ideas in your themes means that you all sort of got the main idea of the poem. So that's really good. So let's just go real quick back to Hadley's theme about beauty. How do you know that this woman doesn't think that she's beautiful? There are a whole bunch of examples, so I want to get a couple of them. Samantha, yeah.
When she looks in the mirror, she gets like all agitated.
Yes, the tears and the agitation of hands, right? That's that's a good example. What's another example of how she thinks she looks? Perfect.
I was gonna say that, it says when she turns to those liars, the candle wasn't in.
Yeah. Yeah, that she like is trying to look really good, but she doesn't trust that she can do it by herself. Just a note about the candles and the moon. When you guys are on Snapchat and you're taking a selfie, do you guys take great selfies that you're like really
Yes.
proud of and put on your story? Do you take them in school
Yes.
No.
with the fluorescent lights?
No.
Yeah, the fluorescent lights do not make selfies look good, right?
Golden hour.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, did everybody, hold on, can I have everybody's attention? Did you all hear Stephanie? Do you guys know what golden hour is?
Oh my god, I hate that.
Dude, that
It's
is
the part
perfect.
that-
Already
Okay.
distracted.
Different strokes for different folks, but can I have
Different
everybody's
strokes
attention
for
while I
different
explain?
folks.
Yeah.
I like that a
Alright,
lot.
so golden hour is when the sun's setting and the light's really pretty, right? And that's when everybody takes pictures and puts them up on Instagram. So those are the things that they're talking about with the candles and the moon. She wants to go out with someone when she looks really nice and the lighting is really low. She doesn't want to go out in her bathroom with the fluorescent lights ahead of her, right? So she turns to those liars, the candle and the moon, exactly. What's one more example of a time that she's like, oh, I really don't like the way I look?
I mean, it's more like the mirror. Like the mirror would be saying, "I'm not cool," and truthful if she didn't think that she was beautiful.
Yeah, so if you're thinking that something is cruel, then it's probably, you're not being cool if you're saying that you're pretty, right? Brooklyn, do you have another example?
Searching her, she didn't know what she was.
Yeah, she wants something else. And so that's both about the fact that she's looking at the surface and seeing one thing, and that she wants to see something else. Stephanie, you have another?
My report to her just something goes that looked like she reportedly lived there, so that's.
Yeah.
What did you say?
And then one more, let's look at the very last line about the terrible fish. Fish aren't attractive, right? How would it be different? What would you think about the speaker? Can I have everybody's attention? That you can't be talking if you're also paying attention to me, right? So we're looking at the last line about the terrible fish. So how does that indicate something about the speaker?
I was gonna say something. If she compared it to like a cute animal, then it wouldn't really mean that she's ugly. If you compare it to a panda, I feel fine. Panda's very cute, fluffy. But like she said, no, like a terrible fish. And
Yeah,
fish aren't attractive.
exactly.
She looked like a fish, but-
Yeah, and so it's not comparing her to a youthful flower, right? It's comparing her to a terrible fish. So we have this idea of aging, even though we don't know what her actual age is. So the next thing that we're going to do, because you guys have read this poem a million times, we're going to listen to someone reading this poem and watch a short film. So this is one particular person's like idea of how to interpret this. You'll notice that at least one part is very different from our interpretation. And as you watch that, I'm going to hand out this blue paper, which is very important for something that you're going to be writing for a big grade. You know the modernism paper that we've been talking about? I am giving you so much help by giving you this blue sheet. So before I hand it out, I'm going to explain it, okay? So at the top, it has the literary elements, which are the three things we talked about yesterday. Does anyone remember any one of the three? Alienation is one of them. Very good. No.
Experimentation.
Experimentation's another one. And the last one. Savannah. Inferences, right? Because there's not information. So we're calling that fragmentation. So you're going to try to find an example, at least one example, for every single one of those while you watch this very melodramatic reading of the mirror. So I'm going to hand those out and some words to things up.
This is 6. The life versus links will never be perfect in society.
You can take this time to make sure that you have all of those boxes filled in your poetry unit packet, because we're going to collect those. So if you have trouble listening to your group members, this is the time to make sure everything is written down. Yeah. Not today. Yeah.
Wait, this whole thing?
Now. Yeah. Now.
silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately. Just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of the little god, four-cornered. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink, with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is a part of my heart, but it flickers. Faces in darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candles, or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and she goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises towards her day after day like a terrible fish.
Turn the lights back on, adjust your eyes accordingly. So, what was different about this interpretation than what we talked about in class? I want to see some new hands. I've heard from a lot of the same people. What's something that's different about this interpretation than the way we talked about it in class, or the way that you pictured it when you read it? Yeah, she was in her room, so like that looked like a bedroom mirror as opposed to a bathroom mirror. She looked very young, yeah. So the fun thing about reading this is that you can picture this whole wide variety of ages. But as soon as you see it on screen, you have a pretty good idea of what age she is, even though the poem doesn't tell you that. So she looks really young at the beginning when she's in the white dress. How about at the end? What does she look like then? She looks the same, exactly. Yeah, she's wearing a different dress, but she doesn't look any older, even though an old woman is rising up to her like a terrible fish, right? Huh?
They could at least use an old woman like the developed part.
Yeah, so what do you think that they might be saying by using the same woman in both of them? Because they could have said, like, she is literally goes from being young to one day she looks in the mirror and she's like, oh my goodness, I look old now. Which is like sort of that idea of surprise that Mr. Murray was talking about earlier. But if she's young the whole time, what does that suggest about the end part? So the fish talks about how it's making ripples and wrinkles. What else could the fish indicate? You know, what else could the fish indicate? Yeah, so another way to interpret that, the way that this particular video did, is that the fish is just something that she's not happy with, as opposed to the wrinkles. I think there's probably some more support for that she's actually aging, and I think they just wanted to use the same actress for this one. but you can see how your interpretation changes based on what you're seeing. What were some other differences? Think about what things they did and did not show, and how they showed the things that they did. Seth.
The wall.
The wall?
It was
Yeah,
really
so
big, and then it was all black and white. So
exactly. So going back to this idea of the speaker, we were following the mirror the whole time. The mirror looks at the wall for a long time. Who are we following in this? Somebody raise their hand and tell me who we're following in this. Who do we see the whole time? The girl, exactly. So the woman is really acting like the speaker in this particular interpretation. So, did you guys like this interpretation?
not really.
No? What didn't you like about it then?
Everything.
It's too like.
Okay, can you raise your hand so that I can hear everybody instead of guessing? Connor, I heard that you had some
Yeah,
thoughts.
it's too like babyish.
Babyish?
Yeah.
What do you think made it babyish?
The way the music, the way the voice is.
I think that the voice is one of the things that bothers me about this, because she speaks for a long time, very, very slowly. You mentioned the lighting. What didn't you like about that? She's outside, there's a whole part of the lake. Yeah, for reference, this was somebody's film project, and so I think it didn't look professional, it didn't look like really well. I think that somebody went out to a field and filmed this. So that's a good point.
So, could you have an accent?
Hard to tell. Hard to tell. What about you?
I was just confused.
You're confused. What confused you about it?
I just didn't understand like what her deal was.
Did you feel that way when you were reading the poem also, or do you think it was the interpretation?
I think it was the video. Because like the poem, I got it to be like this woman who's like freaking out that she's getting old. And then the whole time when she was looking in the lake, I thought the water was so muddy that she couldn't see anything anyways. And then she's like smacking it in her hair.
That's a really good point to bring up. The first thing that I noticed when I read this is that the agitation of hands wasn't like wringing hands, it wasn't like pulling on her hair the way that like we talked about before. It's that she like smacks the water. Like, have you guys seen High School Musical too?
Yeah.
I thought that that was like an unnecessarily overly dramatic part of it, right? And so you don't have to necessarily like the video to have used it as another way to interpret the poem. So going to those blue sheets on your paper, because like I said, this is really going to help you out to have this filled out completely. You're going to get points for that, and it's also going to make writing it so easy. So, what is the first literary example? You can read this right off the page. What's the first literary example up there? Adam, what's the first literary example that it says?
Like you want me to read after literary element one?
The one word thing that we gave to each of these characters.
Oh, alienation.
Alienation. So, who had a really good example of alienation? Adam.
I said the woman is hurt by her appearance because she doesn't like herself, but like it's not an actual force that's hurting her, it's just herself. And like society and what she thinks she should look.
Yes, so she's being hurt by society because of society's beauty standards, right? Can somebody tell me what line is a really good line to support that? And you can just write the line number right next to it. What's a really good line of showing that the woman is hurt by society's beauty standards? That means you gotta turn back to the poem. You can have it open right beside your blue sheet, right?
I'm not sure about these ones, but then she turns to iron.
So how could you support that? Well, society does have ideas about her appearance, right? But the liars are the candles in the moon, right? Yeah.
We were working with team education and stuff to show that she's being
Exactly. So when you're writing your modernism paper, if you want to use the tears and agitation of hand, you have to say, this is a line that Sylvia Plath uses, that she rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. And you have to say, the agitation of hands and tears are indications that she's being hurt by society. So everybody make sure that you've got all this written down so far. Do you have another one, Savannah?
Well, I was for this paper, are we just writing like actual lines from the poem?
You're writing the example that you're going to use, and then you're also writing the line of the poem. What line number of the Tears in Agitation?
So any of those verbs, swallow, meditate, like those verbs.
All right, so moving on to the second one. What is the second one, Alina?
Writers use experimentation in works.
Yes.
Either,
That's good. So experimentation. Okay. We'll take a minute and let everybody write first. So for examples of experimentation, we said that this can talk about a variety of different things. It doesn't have to necessarily be a specific line, but you're going to use a specific line to support it. So what is experimental about this piece? We talked a little bit about this yesterday. Yeah.
It's basically about adjustment.
Yes, it's written from the mirror's point of view, so you can write that down as personification. And that the whole poem is personification. So your answer for number 2 is personification, not because personification has never been used before, but because Sylvia Plath is using it to format her entire poem. So who's got a good line for personification? Remember that since that was one of your literary devices, it's going to be on the graphic organizer on page 10, right? Aaliyah. What? Yes, whatever I see, I swallow immediately, and that's line 2. So for experimentation, you want personification, and line 2. And it would also help you to write out that whole thing.
So you're writing down each of these things. So what do you have for this for characters that are drawn? So that's what it's here. Right? So she's hurt because she's upset about these things.
Okay. Guys, this blue paper, to go back to and to reiterate what Ms. Kramer has said, this blue paper is to aid you when you are about to write your modernism paper. So at this point, we are taking notes and finding examples, because when you write your modernism paper, I've already told you, you have to prove that this poem is a modern poem, right? In order to prove it, what do you need to have? Evidence, right? Evidence from the poem. So what we're doing right now is we are identifying 2 things. We are identifying what, for the first one, right? How are the characters alienated? Well, we know the character is alienated, right? How do we know that? We found a line about it. So on this blue paper, you need to say which character is alienated and what's a line to prove it. That's what you're asking for yourself for each one of these. How do I answer the question, where's the proof? Because when you go to write these paragraphs, this paper, 5-paragraph essay, you're going to have all the facts right there for you. But if you're half paying attention and only writing down a few words, when you go to write that paper, you're going to struggle. Okay? Stephanie? We need to start with the first one first. So are there any, you're confused Because there's only two here, right? The woman coming to the mirror and the mirror itself. How many are you going to focus on the woman? Raise your hand. Okay. So where's evidence that she's alone? That's not enough, right? There are two characters in the story. Mirror, her. So that's not enough. You need textual evidence to support that the woman feels alone, that she's isolated, that she's withdrawn from society. So that would require you to look at the poem and find an instance where it seems as if she's alone, withdrawn, hurt by unknown forces. That unknown force of society. Where is she showing that she's hurt or upset? Yes, she's hurt, she's crying. Society expects her to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Huh? So you can show and provide evidence that she is hurt by the unknown force, which is society, when she is crying and she's shaking her hands in agitation or smacking the water in agitation, right? She's frustrated. That's all you need on that first one. Better understood, Luke?
Yeah.
Two. Go ahead.
For the experimentation, it's on the notes, this is patterns of thinking. I thought when, instead of like the mirror, oh wait, never mind, I get it. I was gonna use a woman as an example, but then I remembered. Okay, never mind.
Yep, personification is the inanimate object given human characteristics. So all of those verbs, right? Meditating, having trouble. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately. Like swallow, meditate, all those things prove that it's being personified. That's experimental.
Yeah, so we have the example of line 2, but any of those lines where there's personification that's clearly shown in that line would be a good example for your paper.
We have multiple examples.
And then the last one, who can tell me what the last characteristic is, number 3? You got a one-word thing for it? What'd you say?
I don't remember, isn't that right?
It's on, if you look on your blue paper, it says the thing that's being used. Well, I heard it. Fragmentation, yes. What does fragmentation mean? Yes, so Savannah helped you all out if you guys were listening. So fragmentation is when some information is left out and the reader has to figure it out. And Savannah gave the example of the woman's age. So how are you going to cite a line if it doesn't tell you that? Stephanie, do you have an idea?
It means she has drowned a young girl in
So we get close to her age, right? But you'd have to explain when you're writing this. So you're using, what lines are those?
oh, that's
17, yes. So line 17, in me she's drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises, so it goes on to 18. That doesn't say, but we don't know how old she is. You have to explain that. So when you're writing down that fragmentation is because you don't know how old she is, and your example is line 17 into 18, you have to also explain that that gets close to the age, but it does not tell you the age, right? So make sure you've got all of that written down. It will even help you if you copy down the whole line. stay in your seats.
Oh, and if you notice that I color code things, okay? So this blue sheet, anything that is blue or dark blue would be related to writing, but it can stay in the unit of study, right? Because it has to do with your poems, but it's going to be helpful with your writing assignments. See, coding is very important.
So I had times like this. Shook his head, this one hit me right in the eye. Right in the eye.